For 3 months, I've been a weapon, trained by a man the Calders destroyed 20 years ago. He found me invisible inside their trillionaire empire. He made me his revenge. I was serving champagne to trillionaires who'd never learned my name. He was watching. He said he could teach me to own the room. I didn't ask the cost. 3 lessons. That's all it took. One target. The heir who never looks at women. Until he looked at me. I was supposed to make him fall so I could watch him burn. No one trained me for what it would feel like when I fell too. The matriarch is dying. She ordered his empire stolen. I hold the proof. Release it, and her grandson burns. The man I was never supposed to love. Destroy it, and I betray the one who made me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where weapons are forged. The Calder estate held 300 of the world's wealthiest people that night. I held a tray. 15 pounds of crystal flutes, 18 glasses of champagne worth more per sip than my hourly wage. I moved through that ballroom the way I'd learned to move through every room since I was 17. Shoulders forward, chin down, eyes tracking exits. Invisible. The trick to serving the rich is simple. Don't exist. Don't make eye contact. Don't have opinions. Don't take up space they might want. Be the hand that delivers, never the person attached to it. I was very, very good at not existing. A woman in a gown that cost more than my apartment lease pivoted without looking. Her elbow caught my tray. Champagne splashed across my shoes, the cheap black ones with the worn soles I'd bought secondhand. She didn't apologize. She didn't notice. Her companion laughed at something. They walked away trailing Chanel and indifference, leaving me standing in a puddle of $200 champagne. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I redistributed the weight of the tray and kept moving. That's survival. You learn it fast when no one's coming to save you. Staff break room, 11:47 p.m. 3 other servers counting tips and cataloging grievances. Did you see that woman with the emerald necklace? Asked me if the salmon was ethical. Marcus rolled his eyes. Lady, your watch could feed a village. The others laughed. I didn't. I was watching the door, the hallway, the pattern of when security walked past. I was always watching. You're quiet tonight, Seren? That was Dana, older, kind, someone who'd stay in this job until it broke her back. Everything okay? Just tired. A lie. I wasn't tired. I was thinking about the woman who spilled champagne on my shoes and didn't notice. About the man who'd snapped his fingers at me like I was a dog. About the girl in diamonds, my age, maybe younger, who'd laughed at something while her date checked his phone. Completely careless, completely free. I didn't envy her. That's what people expect, right? The poor girl seething at the rich girl? No. I was calculating. How she held herself. How the room arranged itself around her. How she never once looked for the exits, because she'd never needed to. I wanted to know what that felt like. Not the money. The certainty. $47.60. My tips for the night. Enough for rent, not enough for anything else. My mother's watch pressed against my wrist. The cheap one stopped years ago. Leather cracked. I never took it off. Couldn't tell you why, except that it was hers. And she was gone. And some things you hold on to even when they don't work anymore. I didn't know someone was already watching me. Calculating right back. Service entrance, 12:23 a.m. The gala was winding down, and I was winding out. Coat over my uniform, bag on my shoulder, $47.60 heavier. The alley smelled like catering garbage and exhaust. I didn't mind. I'd smelled worse. "You're not like the others." I stopped, turned. A man stepped out of the shadows. 62, maybe older. Tall, over 6 feet, but stooped slightly, like he was carrying something invisible on his shoulders. Long, rectangular face, refined bone structure that spoke of old money or good breeding. Silver-white hair swept back from a high forehead. Pale eyes, gray-blue, the color of a frozen lake, watching me with absolute stillness. He wore a black suit, servant's clothes. But he didn't stand like a servant. "That's a strange thing to say to someone you don't know." My voice was flat. "Careful. I've been watching you for 3 hours." He didn't blink. "You served 74 glasses of champagne. You avoided the same security guard twice, the one who checks staff IDs too closely. You memorized the layout of the East Wing from a single walkthrough." My hand tightened on my bag strap. "Who are you?" "Someone who learned a long time ago that the only way to survive in a house like this," he gestured toward the estate behind us, all that marble and money, "is to be invisible." "I'm already invisible." "Yes." His voice was quiet, measured. No contractions when he spoke, every word deliberate. "That is what makes you valuable. The rich teach their children to swim in money. The poor teach theirs to drown gracefully." He didn't say it, but I felt it, the recognition. He knew what it was like to watch from the edges. "What do you want?" "To offer you something." He took a step closer, not threatening, but not safe either. "I can teach you to own any room you walk into. Not just survive in it. Own it." I laughed, short, disbelieving. "And what do you get?" "You do exactly what I say. No questions." The smart thing was to walk away. Every survival instinct I'd honed since aging out of foster care was screaming at me. Too good to be true. Always is. Nothing free ever stays free. But I thought about the woman in diamonds who'd laughed without looking for the exits. The champagne on my shoes. The $47 that wouldn't buy me anything except another week of the same. "What's the catch?" He smiled, just barely. The first crack in his composure. "You won't know until it's too late to matter." My mother's watch pressed against my pulse, the hands frozen at 3:47, the time it stopped, the day she died. I'd never fixed it. Some things you don't fix. You just carry them. I held out my hand. His grip was cold. Mine was steady. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow, 6 a.m., servants' quarters, East Wing. Don't be late." He walked back into the shadows. I didn't even know his name, but I knew, the way your stomach knows before your brain does, that I'd just signed something I couldn't unwrite. Lesson 1. How to be seen. He didn't start with clothes or etiquette or which fork for which course. He started with my spine. "Your shoulders are forward." Edric circled me like I was a sculpture he was considering purchasing. "You're apologizing for existing before you even open your mouth." We were in an unused parlor in the East Wing. Dust covers on the furniture, pale morning light through tall windows. No witnesses, just me and a man whose name I still didn't know. "I'm not apologizing, I'm protecting." Same result. He stopped in front of me. Those frozen lake eyes assessed, catalogued, dismissed. When you enter a room, you don't ask permission. You announce. I straightened my shoulders. Too fast, too forced. No. His voice was patient but relentless. You're performing correction. I need the correction to become invisible. Try again. We did it for 4 hours. Shoulders, spine, the angle of my chin, the speed of my walk, not too fast, not too slow. The precise calibration of eye contact, long enough to claim space, short enough to leave them wanting. Power is not taken. It is given by those who don't realize they're giving it. He said it like a proverb, like scripture. I wrote it down in my head and underlined it. Day 3. A staff meeting in the service hall. 20 servers in identical black and white, waiting for shift.
Assignments.
I walked in. Not hunched, not apologizing. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes forward, meeting gazes, holding them one beat, moving on. Silence rippled outward. Heads turned. Dana, who'd called me quiet that first night, blinked like she didn't recognize me. Serene? She half laughed, uncertain. You look different. I didn't explain, just took my place against the wall and waited. But inside, something was cracking open. Not breaking, opening. For the first time in my life, the room saw me before I saw the exits. Later, in the corridor, Edric stood in a doorway I hadn't noticed, watching. His face betrayed nothing, the perfect servant's mask. But his eyes. For just a moment I saw something flicker there, not satisfaction exactly, something older, something that looked like loss. Better. He turned away before I could ask. I didn't know it then, what he'd lost, what the Calders had taken, why he was building me into something sharp and dangerous. I just knew that a server who'd ignored me for 6 months nodded as I passed. And I nodded back. Like equals. 2 weeks in, Calder family dinner. The dining room could seat 30. Tonight, it held 7. Victoria Calder at the head, oxygen tubes barely visible against her emerald dressing gown, still surveying her empire at 78. Various family members I hadn't catalogued yet. And him. Cassius Calder, 29, the heir. I'd done my research by then. Everyone had. The staff whispered about him like he was a ghost story. The heir who doesn't date. 100 galas never left with anyone. Some say cold, some say broken. I understood broken. You can spot it in the way people hold themselves when they think no one's watching. I entered with the first course. Shoulders, back, chin level. The walk Edric had drilled into me until it stopped being performance. The silence shifted. Victoria Calder's pale eyes tracked me for one assessing moment, the way a hawk tracks movement, decides if it's prey or irrelevant. She dismissed me, returned to her plate. But someone else didn't. Cassius sat at the far end of the table. Classical proportions, the face of someone whose genetics had been curated for generations. Deep blue-gray eyes, heavy-lidded, framed by lashes too long for a man. Dark brown hair with a natural wave, one strand falling across his forehead. A small scar at his right temple, polo accident, I'd later learn. Faint freckles across his nose, visible only in the candlelight. He was looking at nothing, the way rich people look when they've learned that nothing is interesting anymore. Then his eyes lifted, found me, held. 1 second, maybe 2, enough time for something to flicker across his face. Not attraction, not even interest exactly. Awareness. Like he'd heard a sound in a house he thought was empty. His hand moved to the back of his neck, an unconscious gesture. Then he looked down. returned to his performance of eating. But I felt it. The first crack. Edric debriefed me in the servants' passage afterward. His face was unreadable, but there was something new in his voice. Satisfaction, maybe, or anticipation. He noticed. I nodded. My heart was still running faster than it should have been. I saw. That's step one. I waited. He didn't continue. What's step two? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, patience. He walked away before I could ask what we were being patient for. I stood there in the dim corridor, my mother's watch pressing against my wrist, the weight of things unsaid filling the space between us. I didn't know yet that I was the arrow, that he was aiming me somewhere, that the man who'd just noticed me for the first time would become the target. I just knew something had started, something I couldn't see the end of. 3 nights later, 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was the unfamiliar bed in the servants' quarters, the too soft mattress, the silence that wasn't the silence I knew, not city traffic and neighbors fighting, but money silence, the kind you buy. But that wasn't it. Something was wrong with Edric's story. The gaps I couldn't see but could feel, the way he taught like someone who'd lived inside this world, not observed it from the service corridors. His quarters were at the end of the east wing, door half open, light inside, amber, low. I shouldn't have gone in. But I'd spent 10 years learning that the things people hide will hurt you worse than the things they show. So I pushed the door open. He was at his desk, back to me, silver-white hair catching the lamplight. Still in his black suit. Did he ever take it off? Bent over something I couldn't see. A photograph lay face down on the desk. Near it, a drawer, half open. And in the drawer, newspaper clippings. Old ones. Yellowed. I saw a headline before he sensed me and closed it. Just a fragment. A word. Valmonte. Who are you, really? He turned slowly. Those pale eyes, cold, always cold. But something else now. Something caught. Someone who learned that the only way to beat them, he gestured at the estate around us, all that Calder marble and money, is to become invisible. And the only way to destroy them is to be invited in. The word settled between us. Destroy. I should have walked away. Every survival instinct I had was screaming it. You're in over your head. This isn't what you signed up for. You're not a weapon. You're just a girl counting tips in a break room. But I thought about the champagne on my shoes, the woman who didn't apologize, the $47.60 that bought nothing except another week of the same. And I thought about the way Cassius Calder's eyes had found me across that dining room. The crack in his armor. Something in me wanted to be the thing that finished breaking it. You're using me. Yes. No apology, no explanation, just truth. I stood there for a long moment, the photograph face down on the desk, the drawer closed now, hiding whatever history was inside. Then use me for something that matters. Edric studied me. For the first time, I saw something other than calculation in his expression, something that might have been respect or regret. Tomorrow, he said, 6 a.m. We continue. I walked out without looking back. That was the moment I could have turned back. The door was right there. I walked there, other way. The next morning, Edric handed me a dress. Midnight blue silk, clean lines, expensive. I'd never owned anything that fit that perfectly. Lesson 2 begins now. His voice was quiet, measured. The general briefing his soldier. You learned how to be seen. Now you learn how to belong. I took the dress. The fabric was cool against my fingers, silk that cost more than my rent. I pressed it to my cheek just once before putting on the armor. In the mirror, a stranger. Same face, same amber-brown eyes, same cheap watch on my wrist. But something had changed. Not just the posture, not just the clothes. The weapon was starting to believe it was real. Lesson 2. How to belong. If Lesson 1 was about the body, how to enter, how to stand, how to take up space, Lesson 2 was about the performance that never ends. There are 14 forks in this household. Edric laid them out on a polished mahogany table like surgical instruments. You will know each one by instinct, not by counting. I stared at the gleaming silver. In my world, forks came in one variety, the kind that got washed at the end of a shift. The rich don't talk about money. He moved to the next lesson without pause. They talk about everything money buys: the vineyard, the foundation, the architect who designed the summer house. Never the number. The number is vulgar. I took notes in my head, cataloged, memorized. Never look impressed. Never ask what someone does. You should already know. Never admit you've never heard of their yacht club, their school, their bloodline. The rules weren't written anywhere. That was the point. If you had to be told, you didn't belong. Week 3. A charity dinner for something that cured something. I wore a forest green gown Edric had chosen, structured, expensive, nothing that screamed, trying too hard. I was doing well, navigating, remembering which smile for which occasion. Then a woman approached. Calder cousin, blonde, pearls, the kind of face that had never worried about rent. I don't believe we've met. Her smile was a weapon. Are you with the caterers? The room didn't stop, but I felt it slow. The words stuck. Wrong register, wrong confidence. I sounded exactly like what I was. Someone pretending. Oh. Her eyebrow lifted a millimeter. How interesting. She walked away, left me standing there, burning. I went back to Edric that night and made him drill me for 6 hours straight. Conversation patterns, reference, points. The casual intimacy of people who've known each other's families for generations. The Hamptons, Gstaad, the club in Palm Beach, never say the name, just the club. Everyone who matters knows which one. Week 4. A foundation event. Senators, tech billionaires. Old money pretending new money didn't exist. A society matron, 70 if she was a day, dripping in diamonds that probably had names, leaned toward me with a champagne flute. Darling, where did you summer? I didn't hesitate. The vineyard, mostly, though we spent a few weeks in Portofino with friends. I let the right amount of boredom color my voice. You know how it is. The crowds in August are impossible now. She nodded like I'd passed a test she administered daily. Impossible, she agreed. Simply impossible. I didn't go anywhere that summer. I was working double shifts at a restaurant in Queens. But she didn't need to know that. No one did. My mother's watch pressed against my wrist beneath the silk sleeve. The one true thing left on my body. Week 5. The estate library. I was supposed to be lost. That was the excuse I'd prepared. Wrong turn, looking for the servants' corridor, so sorry to intrude. But he was there, and he didn't look surprised to see me. Cassius sat in a leather chair by the window, a book open in his lap. Afternoon light caught the angles of his face, The strong jaw, the slight shadow beneath those blue-gray eyes, the strand of dark hair falling across his forehead. He looked up, didn't speak, just waited. I took a wrong turn. Did you? The silence stretched. Then he gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. I told myself it was strategy, getting close, earning trust. But 2 hours passed, and I forgot to count them. We talked about books first, safe territory. Then architecture. Then, somehow, the conversation turned like water finding a crack. Do you know what it's like? He set down his book, voice dropping to something rawer. To walk into every room, knowing everyone wants something from you? I should have deflected, stayed in character, the perfect student. Instead, I told the truth. I know what it's like to walk into every room knowing no one sees you. I met his eyes. Which is worse? He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. After that, the coincidences multiplied. Gardens. He appeared while I was walking. We discussed the topiary, which was ridiculous, and we both knew it, so we talked about something else instead. The rooftop terrace. Past midnight. He found me looking at the city lights. You're not like the others. He leaned against the railing beside me. Everyone here is performing. Rich coming from him. The heir who'd been on camera since childhood. Aren't you? He turned to look at me. Really look. And something cracked open in his expression. Just for a moment. I don't know anymore. His voice was quiet. I've been playing the role so long, I forgot there was supposed to be someone underneath. He laughed then. Not the bright, practiced public laugh I'd seen at galas. Something shorter, darker, surprised at itself. I laughed too. Genuine, caught off guard. And I thought, oh no. Because the weapon wasn't supposed to feel this. The weapon was supposed to mirror, observe, report, not recognize. He said my name that night. Just once. Seren. He said it like it was the first word he'd ever meant. Week 6, Lesson 3. Edric stood at the window of the unused parlor, back to me, hands clasped behind him like a general briefing a soldier. You've learned to be seen. You've learned to belong. He didn't turn around. Now you learn to win. Emotional intimacy. The science of making someone feel understood for the first time in their life. He finally turned, those frozen lake eyes fixing on me. You will mirror his expressions, echo his speech patterns. Create the illusion that you see him, the real him, when no one else does. I sat very still. The objective is simple. His voice dropped, quieter, more dangerous. Make him fall in love with you. The words landed like stones in still water. And if I fall too? He almost smiled. Almost. Then you've failed. Weapons don't feel, Seren. They perform. I applied the techniques. Mirroring, listening, the careful architecture of manufactured intimacy. They worked. Too well. Cassius opened the way expensive things break, slowly at first, then all at once. He told me about his mother, remarried, distant, present at galas and absent everywhere else. He told me about the expectations, the grooming, the way his grandfather had said, Calders don't have friends, we have allies, when he was 7 years old. And then, one night in the library, he told me about his father. He died when I was 12. His hand moved to the back of his neck, that unconscious tell. Overdose. They called it heart failure. I found him. Cassius. There was a note, his eyes fixed on the middle distance. I've never read it. It's in a safe in his old study. I'm afraid, his voice cracked, caught itself. I'm afraid it says he's sorry. And I'm equally afraid it says nothing at all. I didn't perform my response. I just sat there with his pain and said nothing. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. I reported to Edric that night, the debriefing. He's opening, faster than expected. I kept my voice professional, clinical. Family dynamics, pressure points. The father's death is a significant wound. Edric listened, nodded, made no notes, he never did, everything catalogued behind those pale eyes. What else? I thought of the note, the safe, the way Cassius's voice had broken. That's everything. My hand drifted to my collarbone, unconscious. The tell I'd had since I was a child, the thing I did when I lied. Edric's gaze flicked to my hand, held for a moment. Then he looked away. Good. Continue. He didn't call me on it, but we both knew. I was protecting small intimacies now, keeping secrets from my handler. First betrayal of the mission. First proof that the weapon was starting to feel. Week 7, library, 11 p.m. In a house with 100 rooms, we kept finding the same corners, the same shadows, the same excuses. I told myself it was surveillance, getting closer, building trust. But when I walked into the library that night and saw him standing at the bookshelf, shirt untucked, sleeves rolled, that strand of hair falling forward, I stopped lying to myself. Looking for something? His voice was low, amused. Just browsing. At 11 at night? I walked closer. Not performance now, not calculation, just closer. I couldn't sleep. Neither could I. We were both reaching for the same book, some leather-bound volume neither of us cared about. Hands brushed. Neither pulled away. The space between us collapsed to nothing. I could count his eyelashes, hear the catch in his breath. He turned, faced me, close enough that I could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the small scar at his temple, the way his chest rose and fell, uneven now, no longer controlled. You're the first person. His voice caught, started again. The first person who's looked at me like I might be wrong about something. He searched my face. It's terrifying. Is that why you keep coming back? I don't know. His hand lifted, almost touched my face, stopped just short. I just know I can't stop. The space between us collapsed to nothing. His lips were inches from mine. I could feel his breath. My eyes started to close. Mr. Calder, your grandmother is asking for you. We stepped apart. The moment shattered. He ran a hand through his hair, composure destroyed. I should go. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She's waiting. He nodded, walked past me, stopped at the door. He didn't look back, but his hand went to the back of his neck, that unconscious gesture, his tell for being overwhelmed. Then he was gone. I stood alone in the library, surrounded by books worth more than my life, and tried to remember what I was supposed to be doing. Tried to remember I was a weapon. The problem was, weapons don't tremble. I couldn't stop. Week 8, library, the same corner. He was waiting. I was done pretending I wasn't coming. I kissed him first. Not calculated, not performed, just necessary. The way breathing is necessary after too long underwater. It was brief, soft. I pulled back before he could respond. His eyes opened, blue-gray, stunned, hopeful. Serene. I walked away. He followed. He kissed me like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something for himself. After that, the stolen moments multiplied. Rooftop at midnight, his hands cold, my back against the glass barrier, city lights blurring behind us. His private study, the one room no one else entered. Books he actually read. A photograph of his father I pretended not to see. The hidden garden, past the hedge maze, where groundskeepers never came. In a house with 100 rooms, we kept finding the same corners, the same shadows, the same excuses. She'd been trained to make him fall. No one trained her for what it would feel like when she fell too. The night. I won't describe it. Some things belong only to the people in them. But I will describe the morning. Pale gold light through silk curtains, Egyptian cotton beneath me, thread count I couldn't name but could feel against my spine. His shirt on my body, white linen, soft, still carrying his warmth. He was still asleep, face younger without the performance, peaceful in a way I'd never seen him awake. I slipped out of bed, walked to his bathroom, looked in the mirror. Who are you now? The woman looking back wore expensive fabric over working-class skin, styled hair that had been messed by careful hands, eyes that had watched and calculated and, somewhere in the night, stopped calculating entirely. My mother's watch hung at my wrist, the cheap leather band cracked, the face frozen at 3:47. He appeared in the doorway, warm, sleepy, happy in a way that looked unfamiliar on him. That watch. He crossed to me, traced the worn leather with his finger. What is it? Nothing. My hand covered his. It's nothing. A lie. The last wall I hadn't let him inside. I was supposed to be gathering information for Edric. I was. But I was also falling. She knew she was lying to him. She didn't know that every kiss was also the truth. That night, his breathing even beside me, I slipped away. I told myself I needed to report, update Edric, stay on mission. But I walked past his door, kept walking, found myself at Edric's quarters. The door was unlocked. He wasn't inside. I went in. The newspaper clippings were still there, but more now. An entire file. Thick manila folder, aged edges, hidden in a drawer that should have been locked. I opened it. Valmonte Patriarch acquitted, but Empire destroyed. The headline screamed across yellowed paper, a photograph beneath it. A man, younger but unmistakable. Those same frozen lake eyes, that same Roman nose. Edric. Edric Valmonte. I kept reading. Fraud charges, market manipulation. 20 years ago. Acquitted in court, but destroyed in every other way. Assets seized, reputation burned, family scattered. And beneath it all, documentation. Evidence. The Calders' names everywhere, contracts, memos, board decisions. Proof that they'd orchestrated everything. My hands were shaking. I kept turning pages. Then I found the notes. His handwriting. Asset identified. Seren Vale. Young, hungry, invisible. Perfect for proximity operation. Training progressing. Emotional manipulation techniques absorbing well. No sentimental complications expected. Final phase. The girl will testify. She's the witness. Heir's emotional dependency will ensure credibility. She positions the detonator. I light the match. The girl will testify. She's the witness. I wasn't the student. I was never the student. I was the weapon. The detonator for 20 years of waiting. Everything, the lessons, the polish, the access, the man I loved, was just ammunition. And I'd handed him all of it. Willingly. Gratefully. The file trembled in my hands. 20 years of evidence. 20 years of patience. I closed the folder, slid it into my bag, and walked out of his room carrying everything I needed to destroy us all. 2 days after I found the file, family dinner. I shouldn't have been there. Staff didn't eat with the Calders, but Cassius had insisted. Just this once. I want you beside me. I sat at the long mahogany table, surrounded by inherited paintings and inherited money and inherited cruelty. The file was hidden in my room. The knowledge was hidden in my face. And Victoria Calder was watching. She sat at the head of the table, 78 years old, oxygen tubes barely visible against her emerald dressing gown. She'd never admit to needing them, but the soft hiss was audible if you listened. The cancer was winning. 3 months had become 2. The ticking clock was louder now. But her eyes, pale blue-gray, washed out by age but still sharp as surgical steel, missed nothing. Miss Vale. Her voice cut through the table conversation. Everyone fell silent. I set down my fork, met her gaze. Mrs. Calder. You've become quite comfortable here. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, an accusation dressed in pearls. You've been generous. Her lips curved, not a smile, a predator recognizing another predator. Generosity has nothing to do with it. She lifted her wine glass, barely touched, her appetite gone with her health. Everyone here earns their place, or loses it. The table remained frozen. Cassius's hand tightened on his napkin beside me. I understand. Do you? She studied me the way she might study a contract before signing, looking for the clause that would cost her. You've risen very quickly from the service corridors. My grandson seems attached. Cassius started to speak. She silenced him with a glance. I've seen ambition before, Miss Vale. I've crushed it before. She set down her glass. I'm simply curious which variety yours is. The room waited. I could feel Edric somewhere in the shadows of the serving corridor, watching, always watching. I didn't break eye contact. The surviving kind. Victoria held my gaze for a long moment. Then she laughed, a short, cold sound like ice cracking. We'll see. She returned to her meal. Conversation resumed, but I understood the message. The dragon knows I'm here. The dragon hasn't decided whether to burn me yet. 2 months. That's how long she had left. That's how long I had to choose. Burn them with Edric's evidence and become the weapon, or burn the evidence and become something I didn't have a name for yet. I found him in the East Wing parlor, 2 a.m., the same room where he'd taught me how to stand. The file was in my hands. He looked up when I entered. Those frozen lake eyes registered the folder, registered my expression. He didn't look surprised. You found it. His voice was quiet, unsurprised, like he'd been waiting for this conversation for 20 years. You used me. I threw the file onto the table between us, papers scattered, headlines, photographs, evidence. My name in his handwriting. The girl will testify. She's the witness. Final phase. I quoted his notes back to him. My voice shook with something between rage and grief. I was never the student. I was the ammunition. Edric stood slowly. Those pale eyes held mine. I gave you everything you have. His voice was measured, no apology, no shame. The polish, the access, the posture, the presence, the man you love. He gestured at the file. You think any of that came free? I thought you were teaching me to be more. I was teaching you to win. He stepped closer. And you're winning. Look at yourself. 3 months ago, you were invisible, serving champagne, counting tips. Now you sit at the Calder table. Now their heir can't sleep without you beside him. Now Victoria Calder knows your name. He smiled, just barely. That cold, fractured thing. You're winning, Seren. I made you a winner. I stared at him, at the silver hair, the hollow cheeks, the man who'd lost everything 20 years ago and spent every day since then building a bomb out of patience and borrowed power. No, I'm becoming you. The words hit bone. His smile died. I'm becoming someone who uses people, who calculates every word, who looks at a human being and sees. I gestured at the file, at his notes, at the architecture of manipulation laid bare. Ammunition. Silence. His frozen lake eyes thawed for just a moment. Something cracked behind them, pain or recognition, or the memory of who he'd been before the Calders broke him. Then the mask returned. Then you understand. I understood too much. That was the problem. I understood that he'd been destroyed by people exactly like Victoria Calder, that he'd watched his empire crumble, his wife leave, his children change their names, that he'd spent 20 years invisible inside the house of his enemy, waiting for a weapon to present itself. I understood that everything he'd done to me, he'd done for a reason that made sense to him. But I also understood that I was standing at a threshold. Walk through, and I became him. Patient, calculating, hollowed out by revenge. Walk away, and I lost everything. The mission, the mentor, the only purpose I'd had since the night he found me in that alley. I didn't choose. Not yet. I just turned and walked out. Left him standing in the dark with 20 years of evidence scattered across the floor. My room in the servants' quarters. 3 a.m. I sat on the edge of the bed. The file was in my bag, the one I'd arrived with 3 months ago, the one that still had a stain from when a guest spilled champagne on my shoes. 2 paths forward, neither clean. I could complete the mission, release the evidence, watch Victoria Calder die knowing her empire would crumble. Watch Cassius, the man who'd held me like I was something precious, burn alongside the family he never chose. Become the weapon, the detonator. Edric's final phase. Or I could destroy the file, walk away. Let the Calders keep what they'd stolen. Let Victoria die peacefully. Let Edric's 20 years of patience mean nothing. Betray the man who'd made me everything I'd become. My mother's watch pressed against my wrist, stopped at 3:47. The time she'd died. The time everything had stopped making sense. She would have known what to do. She always knew. But she was gone, and I was here, alone with a choice that would destroy someone no matter which way I turned. I had the weapon. I had the truth. I had everything I needed to burn it all down. The only question was, could I destroy myself, too? 3 days after I walked out on Edric. 3 days of the file sitting in my bag like a live grenade. I finally read it. All of it. The Calder's crime was real. Every page confirmed it. Securities fraud, market manipulation, falsified documents submitted to regulators, witness tampering. A coordinated campaign to destroy Valmonte Industries, not because Edric was guilty, but because his shipping routes competed with theirs, because his media holdings questioned their pharmaceutical pricing, because he existed, and they wanted what he had. They fabricated the fraud charges, leaked them to journalists they controlled, watched him arrested on live television. He was acquitted. The courts said he was innocent. It didn't matter. By then, everything was gone. I found records of his children, Elena and Marcus. I searched for them online. Elena Valmonte became Elena Shaw, corporate attorney in Boston, married, 2 children. No mention of her father anywhere. Marcus Valmonte became Marcus Chen, his wife's surname. Architect in Seattle, specialty sustainable design. His bio mentioned growing up in a difficult household. Nothing else. They changed their names. They think he's guilty. They won't speak to him. He didn't just lose money. He lost everything that made him a person. I sat at my small desk in the servants' quarters, pages spread around me like accusation, and tried to breathe. Cassius appeared in my mind. Blue-gray eyes, the way he'd held me like I was something precious, innocent of his grandfather's sins. 12 years old when Valmonte fell. He didn't know. He didn't choose this family. But burning them meant burning him too. My mother's watch, pressed against my wrist, stopped at 3:47, her compass pointing nowhere. Edric had his own compass. I didn't know that yet, but I understood the metaphor now. 2 broken instruments pointing in different directions. I made it to the bathroom before I threw up. The cost of knowing too much. Your body rejects it before your mind can. His quarters, 11 p.m., 4 days after I found the file. He was waiting. Of course he was. The chess master always knows when the pieces move. They deserve to burn. I didn't sit, didn't perform courtesy. Everything they did to you was real. The fraud, the manipulation, the destruction of your entire life. His frozen lake eyes watched me, revealing nothing. But. He repeated the word like he'd known it was coming. Cassius didn't choose his family. I stepped closer. You didn't choose to lose yours. How is punishing him for his grandfather's sins justice? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, it's not justice. His voice was flat, empty. It's revenge. There's a difference. Then why do you keep calling it justice? He didn't answer. For the first time since I'd known him, Edric Valmonte had no proverb, no lesson, no chess move prepared. You taught me how to see, how to belong, how to win. I watched his face for any crack. You never taught me how to be free. His jaw tightened. Because you're not free. I let the words land. After 20 years, the man who destroyed you still owns you. Victoria Calder is dying, and you're still her prisoner. You're still performing for ghosts. His hands went still, completely still. I'd seen that tell before. When he was about to dismiss someone, when he'd made a decision. But this was different. This was something breaking. You think I don't know that? His voice came out hoarse, raw. You think I haven't spent 20 years knowing exactly what I've become? Then stop. He laughed, bitter, broken. I don't know how. I believe him. That was the worst part. He didn't know how to be anything but revenge. The hate had hollowed him out until there was nothing left to fill the space. I walked out, didn't look back. Left him standing in his quarters with 20 years of patient fury and no idea what to do with it. The next night. His quarters again. I didn't knock. I walked in with the file in one hand and a box of matches in the other. He stood at the window, didn't turn. "You came back." "I came to give you a choice." I set the file on his desk, set the matches beside it. "The one you never gave me." He turned then, looked at the objects, looked at me. "You can release this." I gestured at the file. "Burn them. Get your revenge. Everything you've spent 20 years building toward. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." I lit a match, held it. "But you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you became exactly what you hated. Someone who uses people. Someone who destroys lives to prove a point. Someone who takes revenge on a grandson for a grandmother's sins." I blew out the match, lit another. "Or..." The flame trembled between us. "You can burn the file, walk away. Let them live with what they did, without ever knowing you were here. Victoria Calder will die peacefully, never knowing how close she came. And you'll know something she never will. That you were better than her. That you could have destroyed them. And you chose not to." He stared at the flame, at the file, at the 20 years of evidence and patience and pain. "That's not justice." "No." I set the match beside the file. "It's freedom." I walked to the door, stopped, didn't turn around. 20 years. You can end it tonight. The only question is, what ending do you want? I left him there, alone with the choice. I didn't know which he'd choose. Maybe he didn't either. 3 hours later, I couldn't sleep. I went back to his quarters, found him exactly where I'd left him, standing at the desk, staring at the file, staring at the match. He hadn't moved. "I've waited 20 years." His voice came out broken, hollow. "I've sacrificed everything. My wife, my children, my name, my life." He turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw the man underneath the chess master, exhausted, shattered, alone. "And you're asking me to just walk away? I'm asking you to be free. I don't know how." He was telling the truth. I saw it in his eyes. 20 years of revenge had become his identity. Without it, he didn't know who he was. So I made the choice for him. I walked to the desk, picked up the file. "What are you—" I struck a match. "Seren!" I touched the flame to the corner of the file. Watched it catch. Watched 20 years of evidence, 20 years of planning, 20 years of patient fury curl into orange and black. "What are you doing?" "Freeing you." The file burned. I dropped it into the metal waste bin, watched the flames consume everything. The headlines, the documents, the photographs, his notes, my name. "The girl will testify." Not anymore. Edric collapsed. Not physically, but something inside him gave way. He sank into the chair at his desk and put his face in his hands and made a sound I'd never heard from him before. Weeping. Raw. 20 years of grief, finding the exit wound. I knelt beside him. Didn't touch him, just stayed. "You saved me, even if it was for your own reasons. You found me when I was nothing. You taught me I could be more. You gave me everything I have. He looked up, face wet, eyes red. The mask completely gone. Why? His voice cracked. Why would you do that? Because you taught me how to win. I met his eyes. This is me teaching you how to let go. Three days later, Edric was packing. His quarters stripped to essentials, one small leather bag on the bed. I found him at his desk, holding something small, brass, old, a compass. My mother's. He turned it over in his hands. She gave it to me when I was young. Inscription inside, "Find your way home." He looked up at me. Something different in his eyes now. Lighter, older, free. I was going to leave it on Victoria's grave, after I destroyed them. A final insult, proof that I'd found my way back. He crossed to me, pressed the compass into my palm. The metal was warm from his hands. You helped me find my way home. His voice was quiet. Now find yours. Where will you go? Somewhere no one knows the Valmonte name. Somewhere I can be no one. He almost smiled. Somewhere I can figure out who I am without the hate. I looked down at the compass, the inscription catching the light. You were supposed to be my weapon. I know. You became my conscience instead. He walked past me, stopped at the door, didn't turn around. The only freedom that matters is the one you give yourself. Remember that. Then he was gone. I stood alone in his empty quarters, compass in my hand, the photograph of his children, the only thing he'd taken. Find your way home. I had one more confession to make. I found Cassius in the library, our library, where we'd talked for 2 hours without noticing, where we'd reached for the same book, where I'd kissed him first. He looked up when I entered, smiled, that rare, real smile that transformed his face. There you are. I need to tell you something. The smile faded. He saw my expression, stood slowly. What is it? So I told him. Everything. Who I was, nobody. Hired help, trained to seduce him. Who Edric was. Edric Valmonte. The man his grandmother destroyed 20 years ago. What the file contained. Proof his family was built on stolen bones. What I was supposed to do. Testify. Be the witness. Position the detonator. What I chose instead. Burn the evidence. Free the man who'd trained me. Give up my leverage. Give up everything. He listened. Didn't interrupt. His face went through expressions I couldn't name. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, pain. When I finished, the library was silent. Then, was any of it real? His voice was flat, controlled, the public mask returning. Or was I just Lesson 3? I opened my mouth to answer. Every kiss was also the truth. But the words caught, tangled, came too slow. He saw my hesitation. That's what I thought. He walked past me, didn't look back. Cassius, the door closed behind him. I stood in our library, surrounded by books worth more than my life. The compass pressed into my palm, the cheap watch on my wrist. Find your way home. I didn't know where that was anymore. Victoria summoned him that evening. I wasn't there. But staff talk, walls have ears, and I'd learned to listen. She was propped up in her bed, weaker now, the cancer winning its slow war. but her pale blue eyes still sharp, still assessing. "The Valmonte girl." Her voice was soft, dangerous. "The staff member you've been entertaining. I've had her investigated." Cassius stood at the foot of her bed, didn't sit. "I know." His voice cut through hers. "I know everything." Victoria fell silent. Something shifted in her expression. Confusion, then calculation. "The estate manager, he told you." "She told me." Cassius's voice was flat, empty. "What the Calders did to the Valmontes 20 years ago." For a moment, no one spoke. The oxygen concentrator hummed. The Empire held its breath. Then Victoria. "It was business. They were weak. We were strong." Her voice carried no shame. "Empires are not built by the squeamish. That's how your empire worked." He looked at her. Really looked. Maybe for the first time. "Not mine." "You don't have a choice." Her voice sharpened, the dragon showing teeth even now. "You're a Calder." He turned, walked to the door. "No." He didn't look back. "I'm choosing not to be." The dragon, for once, had no response. She would die alone, never knowing Edric had been in her house for 10 years, never knowing how close she'd come to ruin. The cruelest revenge. She never knew. My room in the servants' quarters. Midnight. The compass on my desk, the cheap watch on my wrist. The bag I'd arrived with 3 months ago, still stained from champagne that cost more than my hourly wage. Everyone was gone. Edric, walking towards somewhere he could be no one. Cassius, walking away from the name that had imprisoned him. Victoria, dying alone in her empire, never knowing how close she came. And me, standing in the wreckage, holding a compass that told me to find my way home. I didn't know where that was. I didn't know who I was without the mission, without the lessons, without the man I'd loved and lied to and lost. But I knew one thing. The weapon had chosen what to destroy, and it wasn't them. The days after were quiet. That's what I remember most. The silence. Not the dramatic kind, just the ordinary emptiness of rooms where something ended. My quarters in the servants' wing. Small bed, small desk. The bag I'd arrived with 3 months ago, still stained from champagne that cost more than my hourly wage. The compass sat on my nightstand, brass catching the gray morning light. Find your way home. I didn't know where that was. I'd look at my reflection and not recognize the woman there. Same olive skin, same amber-brown eyes, same cheekbones that Edric had taught me to carry like weapons. But the weapon had chosen what to destroy. And now it had to figure out what to become instead. Staff whispered, "Walls have ears, remember? The heir isn't speaking to anyone, locked in his father's study for hours. Did you hear? The estate manager left, didn't even give notice. The grandmother's worse. Doctor came twice yesterday." The empire was crumbling quietly. Not from the evidence I'd burned, that was ash now, meaningless. But from choices. Cassius's choice. Victoria's dying. The weight of what people decide when they finally see the truth. My mother's watch was still on my wrist, the cheap one, stopped at 3:47. I'd been hiding it under expensive sleeves for 3 months, playing at being someone who didn't need the past. Now I pushed up my sleeve, let it show, over the cuff, not under. The one true thing I'd ever owned. Find your way home. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was just being honest about what you carried. I wasn't there when he went to her, but I learned what happened. Victoria Calder, 78 years old, weeks left. Propped against silk pillows in a room worth more than most people's lives, still wearing her emerald ring like armor. Her grandson stood at the foot of her bed, the heir who had rejected the inheritance. Everything I built. Her voice was thin now, barely a whisper. Everything I sacrificed. You're going to throw it away. You sacrificed other people. His voice was steady, final. That's not sacrifice. That's theft. She didn't respond. Maybe couldn't. Maybe finally understood. He walked out of her room, didn't look back. She died 3 weeks later, alone, her empire intact, her bloodline walking away from it. The cruelest revenge. She never knew Edric had been in her house for 10 years, never knew how close she came to ruin, never knew that mercy, not justice, was what saved her legacy. His father's study, unchanged for 17 years. Cassius went there after leaving Victoria. I know because a maid told me later, saw him through the crack in the door. Didn't interrupt. Knew better. He opened the safe, the one he'd never touched. Inside, an envelope. His father's handwriting. The note he'd never read. His hands shook when he opened it. We don't know what it said. He never told anyone. But the maid said he sat there for an hour. Didn't move. Didn't speak. And when he finally stood, there were tears on his face. Not grief. Something else. Release, maybe. Permission to let go. He left the note on the desk, walked out of the estate with nothing but the clothes on his back. The Calder heir. Unbecoming. 1 year later. December again. The anniversary of everything falling apart. But this December was different. My apartment. Modest, clean, a walk-up in a neighborhood where no one knew the Calder name or cared. Plants on the windowsill that I'd somehow kept alive. A small desk where I did the accounting for the business I'd started. Not a gala, not a trillionaire, estate, just a life. The compass sat on my shelf. I looked at it every morning. Didn't need to read the inscription anymore. Find your way home. I was getting there. Slowly. A magazine on my desk, business section. I'd bought it for an article about small consulting firms, but I never got past page 12. Former Calder heir launches ethical investment fund. His photograph. Cassius. Hair shorter now, posture different, relaxed, not performed. Eyes that looked like they'd finally slept. I wanted to prove wealth can be clean, he'd said in the interview. It took leaving everything to understand what anything was worth. I smiled. The first one that didn't cost me anything in months. He looked calmer, lighter, like a man who'd finally stopped performing. I wondered if he thought about me, if he'd ever forgiven. My phone, unknown number. I almost didn't look. Text, message. Coffee shop on 5th and Main. Terrible coffee, but they stay open late. I laughed, out loud, surprised by the sound. He counted. Every day. I grabbed my coat. The cafe on 5th and Main. Small, crowded in a comfortable way. The kind of place where the coffee really was terrible, but nobody came for the coffee. He was waiting by the window. Table for two. 2 cups already there. I stopped at the door, watched him for a moment. A year. 12 months of not knowing if I'd ever see him again. 12 months of wondering if the last words between us would always be, "Was any of it real?" And the silence that followed. He looked different, calmer, the public mask gone completely. He was wearing a simple gray sweater, no designer labels in sight. Hair slightly longer, eyes clearer. He looked like someone who'd finally stopped running. He saw me, didn't smile, not yet, just watched me walk toward him. 1 year. You counted? Every day. I sat across from him. The compass was in my pocket. I'd brought it without thinking. Took it out now, set it on the table between us. He looked at it, understood. Find your way home. Was any of it you? His voice was quiet, not angry anymore, just tired of not knowing. Or just the training. I thought about lying, performing one more time, giving him the answer that would make this easier. But I was done with easier. The lessons taught me how to make you fall, how to mirror, how to be the thing you needed. His face didn't change. Waiting. They didn't teach me how to miss you for 12 months. I met his eyes. They didn't teach me how to wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. That was just me. He was quiet for a long moment. How do I know you're not still performing? You don't. I didn't look away. That's what trust is. Choosing to believe when you can't be certain. His jaw tightened. I saw the struggle. 12 months of hurt, 3 months of lies. Everything I'd done and everything I'd chosen not to do. He couldn't commit. I saw it. I started to stand. Wait. I stopped. Didn't sit back down, not yet. The coffee really is terrible. I almost smiled. The worst. Stay anyway? I looked at him, at the man who'd been my target and became something I hadn't planned, at the year between us and the question still unanswered. I sat back down. We didn't touch, didn't kiss, just sat. Two people learning to begin again. His hand rested on the table, mine rested near it, not touching, not yet. But close. That was enough. For now, that was everything. He spent 20 years chained to his revenge. I spent 1 year chained to a question. Cassius spent his whole life chained to a name he never chose. But the man who taught us both had one last lesson. One he didn't know he was teaching. Freedom isn't something you find. It's something you give. To yourself. To the people who hurt you. To the people you've hurt. Edric took nothing with him but a photograph of children who'd forgotten his name. Cassius took nothing from the estate but his father's words, whatever they were. I kept the compass. Find your way home. I'm still looking. But for the first time, I'm not looking alone. This is American Billionaire Tales, where fortune meets fate. I'm Michael. And if this story taught me anything, it's that the chains we choose to carry become heavier than the ones forced upon us. The only freedom that matters is the one you give yourself. But Seren's story isn't over. Edric Valmonte walked away from the Calder estate. But the Calders have enemies older than him, debts that weren't burned with the file. And when you destroy evidence of one crime, you sometimes become the witness to another. If you felt something watching this story, if it haunted you, made you think, made you feel, then let me know. Comment, share, subscribe. Tell me you want to see where this goes. Because part 2 isn't promised, it's earned. 1,000 likes, 100 comments. Proof that Seren's story matters to someone besides me. And if it does, I'll show you what happens when the weapon discovers she wasn't the only one being forged. Find your way back.